This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. Firstly, I hope you are fighting fit, family and friends too. Coming up very soon, you'll hear a chat I had with former Club England Managing Director Adrian Bevington. But first, thank you for all your feedback on the recent episodes, especially those in the Your First England Away Game series. I've got more up my sleeve, plus another of our England at the European Championships coming soon. Don't forget, all previous episodes can be found at threelionspodcast.com or your preferred podcast provider. And I'll let you know at the end of this recording how you too can get involved. Now, with no further ado, here's that conversation I had with Adrian Bevington. Welcome to the Three Lions podcast. As you'll know, over previous episodes, we've tried to dip my toe into the England world, not just on the player front, but I've been fortunate enough to speak with the likes of Peter Taylor, Gary Lewin, Tim Diath, who all in their own way help Team England function. And this time, I'm pleased to welcome Adrian Bevington to the Three Lions podcast. Adrian, hello.
Hi, Russell. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, all things considered. And yourself?
Very well. Looking forward to this chat.
Good stuff. Well, in the current situation we find ourselves in, I have heard you talking about it on various media outlets and how it affects football, and obviously people are missing it. And I thought, well, rather than talking about what we don't know in regards to when we'll see it again, perhaps we could have a chat about your time with England, the good times, and what you can tell us about the FA, some anecdotes and some positive stories.
I shall do my very best for you.
Well, I mean, you worked for the FA in various guises, I believe, for about 17 years. Is that right?
Yeah, just for 17 years. Started off as a press officer with Peter Taylor back in 1997. Went to the World Cup with the team in 98 as one of the team press officers, and over a period of time became head of media, head of comms, and director of comms in, I think it was 2004-05. And then went on around the time of the South Africa World Cup to become the MD of the sort of newly formed Club England department, which was in effect the lead executive across all of the operational side of managing the 24 England teams. And then I remained there till I left the organisation in December 2014, which I think I'd been at the wicket long enough by then.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, was it always the dream to work in football and perhaps work for the FA?
I can't say it was always the dream to work, in the roles that I did or work for the FA specifically. But I always wanted to be a footballer. Like I'm sure so many England fans, you start off as a kid, you want to be a footballer. And I played football all my life as a young boy, and literally played for lots of different teams and. Got so far down the line, but in the end, it didn't happen for me. So the next best thing was to find a career working in the game, and I kind of stumbled my way into it, if I'm being honest with you, with Middlesbrough back in the early mid-90s, and it went from there and ended up with the FA in 97, but always had a big passion for England. And, I don't say that glibly. I think a lot of people can talk about, this, that and the other, but I was digging some pictures out the other day, as lots of people are doing at the moment for Facebook and things, and, found a picture of my first England shirt when I was about 6 with, the first Admiral England kit.
Oh, yes.
Then I had the red one, which I always remember them wearing in Bulgaria in about 79, I think it was, when they wore the white socks with the white shorts and the red top. Things like that. I remember my first, I vaguely recall the England-Scotland game because my dad was down in London that day, but I also really clearly remember the England-Italy game in 77. when they played the Wingers with Barnes and Coppell, Keegan and Brooklyn playing that night. And I was a really young boy, but that sticks with me, that game, because we were so fantastic that night and should have won by a hatful. And obviously just narrowly missed out because of previous results on the Argentina World Cup. So then you bounce forward, don't you, into Spain 82 and everything from there. So, yeah, always been a big England fan. So it was a dream come true to work around the team, yes.
So you started working on the media side of things. That must have changed throughout your tenure or you've seen changes to where we are now.
Yeah, it's changed radically, just insofar as the developments with websites, 24-hour rolling news, the different platforms that are available, and the social media element. It's all grown various tentacles. When I first started, it was very much dominated by the writers, a small number of broadcasters, both radio and TV. That was it, really. The newspapers, I'm not saying they're not powerful now, but they were incredibly powerful during those days. And a lot of very big name football writers who were very close around the setup, and maybe been very close around the England setup for many, many years as well. So yeah, it changed dramatically. I think the World Cup in South Africa was a real big game changer because social media had a massive influence on that World Cup for the first time. But we didn't even have Sky Sports News when I first went to the World Cup in France '98. That came on the back of that. So massive landscape changes during that period, and a lot to contend with for people working in the industry, both, club side, FA side, but also on the media side as well.
We've done a recent podcast that looked at Euro 96. And of course, just prior to Euro 96, there was the infamous incident that happened out in Hong Kong. And I think it was The Sun that gave England a front page rather than the back page there. That obviously you weren't involved at that point, but you must have come across some real hard times on sort of the media front and newspapers. Yeah,
I mean, look, we unfortunately at times did find ourselves on the front pages, be it for the private lives of managers, and we can all laugh about some of the episodes of Sven's time in charge. That was very much personal life related in the main. We had, that episode when I'm kind of laughing now, but I wasn't laughing at the time.
I bet.
When the players ended up on the front page when it was the alleged proposed strike before we went to play that game in Istanbul in 2003, when Rio Ferdinand hadn't missed a drugs test by all accounts. So that was quite a turbulent period, and the players got stuck on the front page. There's been one or two occasions when we've made the front end of the book, not for the right reasons or in positive times, and it's you just don't want to be there, quite frankly. In the end, everybody involved in the main around football is in it for football, and you want to be on the back pages or in the sports sections of any media outlet. So it's very challenging because you can get a call. I remember when Sven got stung by the fake shake. You remember that story?
Mm.
And I was at home on a Saturday afternoon, late afternoon, and I got a call from two journalists, very senior football writers on Sunday newspapers, one of them a sports editor, marking my card that Sven had been done by the fake shake. Now, I knew he'd been abroad that week in the Gulf. I knew he'd been there with permission for a project he was allegedly talking to somebody about. I rang one of his representatives and said, I'm hearing that we've been done by Sven's been done by the fake shake. I was absolutely categorically assured that wasn't the case. I then went back to my two contacts and advised them it's not my understanding, and then they came back shortly after and said, I can assure you it definitely is the case, and within a very short period of time he was on the front page of the News of the World. And then, but we're all in the office the following morning, Sunday morning, and the world's falling in because it just didn't look good, and we had another section up the following week. Now, it was a very complicated process, that, because I believe Sven in the end, after his time with England, took legal action against the newspaper, and I think he was successful. I stand to be corrected on that, about some of the things that were said in there. But it just shows you the level of exposure that you're dealing with around the national team. And during that period, you remember very well, Russell, we had that group of players that were tagged the golden generation, and there were some big stars, big names in those teams.
Yeah. So do you think now the likes of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram have made things a little bit easier for people in that were in your position back then?
Look, there's a lot of challenges with social media, but I think it gives the players and high-profile people the chance to have some direct interaction with the public, with the fans, and I think that's really important. And from the very outset, I've been an advocate of it, because I think if used wisely, it does fill that chasm that we all know as certainly perceived to have grown over a decade or more. That there's too much distance between players and the fans. So it does, I think, and a lot of the players have been brilliant, and their management, in the way that they are, creative with some of the content that they put on, particularly things like Instagram. They can show some of the things that, would have been impossible to show before, a little bit more about them as being people. So I see it as a positive. It's not always a perfect place on social media, as we all know, because it can get a bit aggressive, volatile at times. But yeah, in the main, if harnessed correctly, I think it's positive. I'm
guessing as well that under your watch, as it were, St George's Park must have been, you must have seen it from its early beginnings to its fully functioning as it is today. That must have been good to have seen and been involved with.
It took a long time. I remember going to a field in East Staffordshire with Adam Crozier, who was then chief exec, and Howard Wilkinson, who was technical director, in around about 99, 2000. And a photo call at a gate, which was the entrance to the site. And it was another 10 years before it was finished and more. So, it was put on hold for a long time just because of the financial circumstances during one particular period. But watching it then be built and, the fantastic facility it became very quickly, that's something that I think we were all very proud of within the organisation. There was a number of people who played key roles in that. I wouldn't say myself, but a lot of other people who, were dedicated to that project. And it's good that you see now Gareth Southgate at the helm of the England team, when Gareth himself, in his previous capacities with the FA, was an integral voice to those conversations. And I think that just showcases the qualities of the individual that Gareth is.
What's Gareth like to be around and work with? I'm sure you've had experience with him.
He's brilliant, and I don't say that lightly. I've been fortunate enough to work with so many people in football over the years, and I can honestly say that Gareth is right up there as being the very, very best person. I thought from when he was a player, and I used to sit and have breakfast with Gareth on a frequent basis back in sort of early 2000s, and we just have a chat. I always thought he could easily go on to be a top manager. He obviously had his spell at Middlesbrough, which, he was comfortable in mid-table in the Premier League for his first couple of seasons, but unfortunately did get relegated in his third season. But spending time around him as an individual, I was delighted when we got him back into the organisation, working with Sir Trevor Brooking, who's another great person, by the way. And then when he came back in as the under-21 coach, spent a little bit of time around that team, travelled to a game in Croatia, and loved the way he got it set up. The environment with the staff was brilliant. The players clearly really liked playing for him. He's got brilliant values as a person, which he lives. He's got, I think, a really good philosophy towards international football. I know he's a massive fan of Terry Venables, who he played for. And I think he rates his time under Terry as being one of the best that he ever had as a player. Takes a lot from that and others that he worked with. And he's a brilliant communicator. And I think the FA are very fortunate that they've got someone like Gareth, who is the perfect fit to be the England manager at this particular time. He leads from the front. He understands and gets things. And I think as England fans, I know people weren't necessarily all jumping through hoops when Gareth was appointed, but he's done such a good job, carried that team with him, built the team, changed the shape a few times, and I think the fans have really embraced him as well. So there's a great rapport there between Gareth and the fans, and it's made it a whole lot easier on the communications piece because of that.
Yeah, and you mentioned the under-21s there, and I personally think it was a right move for him to come from that under-21s through to the senior section and manage the senior team. I think that was a wise move, and I think that's one of the reasons why England fans have taken to him, and his personal touch. The recent letter he put out was a really nice touch as well.
I agree entirely, and that's that is Gareth, and I'm sure there will have been people within the FA, particularly in the communications division, who will have spoken to Gareth about that. But also Gareth, they are Gareth's words. He will care passionately, and that's what he will have wanted to do. And he just, I don't think England have probably had a manager that has worked so deeply within the FA before. So he is probably more suited to being the England manager than anyone else who's ever been in the job before, because they've come from club roles. And you used to get all those questions about, how are you going to fill your time day to day? Well, Gareth knows that because he's been a 21s coach. Because he was the guy who worked within the player development department with Trevor Brooking and was, going around the country to county FA meetings, meeting with people from different leagues to convince them that we needed to change the small-sided football nature of the game about 10 years ago. He gets who the players are in the youth system. And he's also been integral to the England DNA, which is one of the key reasons why we are where we are now.
And I guess that's as well what's often said about St George's Park, isn't it? That DNA.
The DNA was crucial, and to be fair to Trevor Brooking, he was there at the outset of that. Dan Ashworth, who then, there was a joint period with Trevor and Dan before Trevor retired, and then Dan picked up that baton with Gareth, with Matt Crocker, who's now gone to Southampton, and people like Dave Redding. And they kind of crafted that, and you could see it developing, and once I'd left, I could still see it very clearly. I just think they got into a rhythm of winning at the junior tournaments, which was something we'd struggled with previously. Even though we'd had good players, we kind of got ourselves lost a little bit in some of those youth tournaments where we, instead of, in my opinion, trying to win one tournament, we spread ourselves too thin when we couldn't then win any across the different age groups in the summer. So we kept qualifying, but then never actually winning. And I think what's been great to see over the past, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years, is we've started really being successful at those development tournaments, and we have to continue that, because just winning is a good habit. But also the teams that have been dominant at world football, like Spain for their sustained period, had been massively successful at development tournaments.
How far do you think we are behind the likes of Spain, or are we on a level with them now, do you think?
Well, I think there's no doubt about it. The players that we've got coming through, we are currently one of the best teams in the world. And that's not me sitting here saying we are the best team in the world or that we will win this tournament, etc., etc. But we have such a depth of quality of players coming through and already there that we've got to be competing with the very best teams. I mean, the proof in the end is in the pudding. In major finals, can you actually do it? But I look at France at the moment. And I think France possibly have the best squad in the world, in my opinion, and they would have been favourites going into this summer's tournament had it been played. But there would have been a lot. There's always expectation on England, but there would have been a lot of expectation on England, and England have such a lot of verve at the moment, a lot of pace. A very attack-minded team, and ultimately that would frighten any team that you're playing against in a tournament. So it gives you a real chance, plus the home advantage that we'd have had in this tournament, and hopefully we'll have next summer. Yeah,
let's hope so. Now you've been to, was it 5 World Cups and 3 European Championships?
Yeah, I have.
All in various different.
Yeah, and up until 2010, always in media or comms roles. But I also went to a lot of, a number of under-21 tournaments, under-20 World Cups, been out to women's Euros and World Cups, and under-17s and things like that. Back in 2011, I think it was, I went to Serbia with the under-17s under John Peacock and Kenny Swain, great blokes. And, in that squad, you had people like Raheem Sterling was in that group, Jordan Pickford played, Nathan Redmond was in that group. I actually, on that trip, I got a phone call from John Peacock before I went, because I didn't go on all those trips frequently, but I wanted to just make sure I was having a look at how it was and supporting the staff on that particular trip. And it was a qualifying tournament with 4 teams. And John said, "Oh, look, we've got one player who can't come out with us on the Saturday, but he's coming out on the Sunday. I think you're coming out on the Sunday, aren't you? Would you be able to look after him coming out? He's only 16. I said, "Yeah, no problem." It was Raheem.
Right.
So, great. Yeah, no problem at all whatsoever. So I'm due to go to Heathrow on the Sunday morning, and I think it was a lunchtime flight or early afternoon flight, and I got a phone call about 9 o'clock in the morning. It was Raheem. "Hi, it's Raheem. I'm at Heathrow. Where are you?" So, blimey, I haven't set off yet, mate. I'll be there as quick as I can. So I said, just sit yourself down and out of the way, and I'll see you as soon as I get there. So I get myself round to Heathrow, and he and I then we go through customs and spend a bit of time having a bite to eat in the cafe beforehand. We fly in just really bog standard tickets, flying on a small airline. Get to Belgrade Airport, and unfortunately Raheem's bag doesn't come off the carousel, so I had to go and hunt his bag down with all his gear in, which was quite a start. But then we then shared a car for however long it was to get to Novi Sad, where we were based. And I said it's the first time I ever met Raheem, so I've always kept a really close eye on him, and I've been delighted with his developments during that period, and the developments of him as a person as well. When he got up on the stage and did his speech at the Player of the Year award last year, he's really grown up as a person. So, it's little things like that you remember, and you'll never forget, quite frankly.
Yeah, it must be really pleasing to see. You were Club England managing director between 2010 and 2014. Was that sort of just promotion within the FA? And what does the managing director do? Right.
So, what happened then was I spoke with the chief exec at the time, who was Ian Watmore, who is incoming to the England Cricket Board. And I was, I'd done by that point about 13 years in the organisation, which, while it's a massive privilege, it was a pretty full-on job, 24/7, if I'm being honest with you. And I was ready for a change. And Ian, with one or two others, said, "Well, look, we're creating an England department, in effect, rather than have it been sat in international, some in youth development. It was kind of a bit potted around the organisation, so brought it all into one structure, and they called it Club England." Personally, I wasn't a particular fan of the title, but that's by the by. And in effect, I was the managing director. I was the chief executive of that department. What did we do? Well, we had all the staff who did a brilliant job with all of the operations. One thing about England, whenever they travelled anywhere, home or away, the operation was absolutely first class. Any player who's ever been around England will tell you that, whether it be travel, accommodation, security, just the general operation, the planning, it was always spot on. And some great people who worked. You'll have heard, I'm sure, of Michelle Farah,
yes.
Anne Romilly, who was part of that team, as well as many other people. Who contributed massively across different teams as well. So every month I would host a meeting that had the chairman of the FA, generally David Bernstein, for that period, who was a really good man and good chairman for the FA, the chief exec of the FA, myself, then people like Michelle. But we'd also have the England manager, we'd have the under-21 coach, we'd have the women's coach, we'd have the technical director, so Trevor, then Dan, we'd have Ray Clements in there as head of national teams, we'd have the commercial people come in, the legal people, so we could have a really good mixture. And that was a forum that had never really existed before, with the football coaches, technical people, and the administration people all in one room on a routine basis where we agreed fixtures for all the teams. We agreed sign off on lots of different activities. We agreed, even things like sign approval for the kit, so everyone bought into it. Lots of things occurred in that meeting, and it was properly minuted. And to be fair, that was something that I really enjoyed, because I felt that brought us closer together as a unit, so everybody knew what we were doing and planning better. There was always a great deal of planning going on, but it wasn't always quite as joined up as it had been, as it got to be.
What would be the most memorable thing, though, or sort of, I don't know if legacy is the right word to say, but that have come out of your time as being managing director there? What sort of you're most proud of at that time?
I'm not sure it's about legacy or being proud of anything. I've just got some great memories. Ultimately, the disappointment is that we didn't win anything. So, you don't really leave a legacy of success, which obviously is the disappointment. But, but for a couple of penalty shootouts, particularly in 2004 in Portugal, I could be sitting here talking to you as a team, being involved in a team that won the European Championships.
Could have been that year.
Yeah, and I remain convinced that, we can all talk about what might have been, but I do honestly believe that if Wayne Rooney hadn't had his foot injury when we were 1-0 up earlier on in that game against Portugal, and he's the best player in the tournament, I think we go on and win that game comfortably. And that gives us the chance then to, the tournament really opened up and we would have had a real chance of winning that. And I felt the confidence in the group. It was a cracking set of players. Confidence in the group was really, really there. And then you bounce on to Germany 2006, and there was a lot of pressure around that team. The expectation was really incredibly strong. But we had good players. And when you name that team, some really good players there. I don't think we particularly performed well in any of the games during that tournament while winning. And then we came to the quarterfinal with Portugal, and I actually thought we were the better team in that game. Even with 10 men, I think we could have easily won that game with 10 men. And then, of course, the penalty shootout came and we just collapsed, as we habitually did, until Gareth got that sorted out in Russia. You kind of knew that you were going to lose a penalty shootout. Ironically, I thought the team that Roy took to Ukraine in 2012, I thought that team probably performed to a par for what it was at that particular time. And I thought in the penalty shootout, I think, if I'm starting to be corrected, but I think we got the serve back. So in effect, we should have gone on to win it under the law of averages. And at one point, I thought, crikey, we're actually going to win a penalty shootout here. Was it Ashley Young who absolutely smashed one? I think it hit the bar, right in the middle of the bar, full on. Flew back out. And it's like, never criticise someone for smashing the bar with a penalty, in my opinion. And you just think, blimey, if that goes an inch under, we probably do go on and beat Italy, who'd, kept the ball off us for about 89 minutes in the game. So you just never know. But so I'm pleased that they've got over that hurdle, and that hasn't happened by chance. They've worked very hard on the penalty side of it. And I know, speaking to Sven about it, he regrets that he hadn't spent more time involving a sports psychologist to work with the team to overcome that, what became a genuine mental hurdle.
It's still always a learning curve for managers, isn't it? They're always reflecting back.
Yeah, the best ones do anyway, because no one has all the answers. But I think you've also got to have massive belief. I've been very privileged to work with so many different managers at different levels, and to be the England manager, you've got to have a strength of character, because the resolve you need when you're under pressure is massive. And even I spent quite a bit of time with Sir Bobby Robson after he'd been the England manager, but spent time talking to him, and an unbelievable man. And even though Bobby's was the most genial man you'd ever meet, his strength of character was always there. It was the same with Terry, who obviously I had some experience dealing with Terry when he was working with Steve McLaren.
Yes.
You could see with Terry that his steel was there, and it was. You've got to have that, because you've got a massively responsible job. You're leading the nation. You're there to inspire a group of players, lift them, take the pressure off them, be tactically astute, and be someone who can be front of house and manage them. One of the more forcible media packs in the world, and a huge fan base. We've always had brilliant support, but then you look back and think to those tournaments in Japan where you turn out in the ground and 3/4 of the ground were England fans. It was just breathtaking.
Japan was a wonderful place to go to. That was my first away England tournament, and I've got some great memories of that one.
I'm sure there's so many fans' stories from that tournament. I mean, it was a great time because obviously Sven had come in about 18 months earlier, and I think he changed things really quickly without, in a classic Sven way, he didn't. There was nothing overtly radical, but he got the team winning very quickly. We played that game in Greece. We beat Greece 2-0 in Athens in a qualifier, where I still think that was one of England's most complete performances in a qualifying game. Then, of course, we went to Germany and pulled off that 5-1 result, which was just an unbelievable night. And the momentum that we had going at that point was unreal for quite a new team. There was a lot of inexperienced players in that team mixed with some experienced guys. So if you remember, Peter Taylor had sort of made some radical change for the one game he had in charge, and Sven kept some of them because Pete was in his squad as a coach, and so was Steve McLaren. And so the Germany night was just unreal. The Greece game, obviously, which we didn't play well that day, but we had the goal from David, which will be eternally remembered. And I just felt going into that tournament in Japan, the euphoria from the fans was just something really special. But people might forget that we picked up injuries. Steven Gerrard had to pull out with injury before that tournament, right on the eve of us going, unfortunately. And that was a big loss for us as a squad. Gary Neville was injured for that tournament as well, if you remember. And Michael Owen was actually carrying an injury all the way through that tournament as well. He was having intensive physio to get him through those games. So we weren't quite as strong as we perhaps could have been, but still magical. But the game in Munich, what a night that was. And Michael scoring that hat-trick, swapping shirts with Jörg Böhmer, the Germany fullback from Schalke. And then as I was meeting Michael as he was coming off the pitch to take him for his TV interview, I sort of said, "Michael, what have you done with your shirt?" I said, "You swapped it." I said, "You've just got a hat-trick in Munich against Germany." I said, "You've just swapped your shirt." He said, "How can you get me it back?" I said, "Well, okay, I'll do my best." So, not being able to speak German, I called Tony Woodcock, who was a friend of mine who was at the game near the tunnel, and said to Tony, "Look, I need your help, mate, big time." So you can imagine us knocking on the Germany door after they've just lost 5-1 and having to go in there and do a shirt retrieval swap with Jörg Böhmer to then give it back to Michael. But if you see pictures of Michael immediately after the game, he's actually carrying, he might even be wearing the shirt. I think it's a number 3 shirt. So he's actually wearing that shirt immediately after the game when he swapped it, but he actually got the original shirt back.
Yeah, I've seen a picture of him wearing it, but I wasn't aware of that story there. No, that's great. I mean, you must have one or two other little anecdotes, have you, from your time, if you could share with us?
I've got plenty of anecdotes. I don't know how many of them I'm able to share. There was a brilliant one for me with Howard Wilkinson. If you remember, Kevin obviously resigned in the toilets at Wembley after the Germany defeat in the old Wembley, which was a bit of a production because I was running around the stadium getting Adam Crozier down at the dressing room and one or two other people. And then I got called in, Kevin there, and we're stood in the back of the old dressing rooms at Wembley, which weren't particularly great. And the guys are telling me that Kevin is adamant he's resigning and I need to go and do something with the media. Meanwhile, the U Ryan's literally about a foot away while one of the more established players is stood going through the motions at the toilet. You're thinking, this is quite surreal. And then I remember ringing Howard. I worked closely with Howard because he was with all the youth teams, which I also did all the work with it from the media side of it. And I rang Howard, and he was on the bus going back to Sopwell House in St Albans, where the 21s who was in charge of it at the time. And I said, "Howard," I said, "how are you doing?" He said, "Oh, what's happened?" Blah blah blah. I said, "Well, you might want to be getting your bag packed and spinning around. I think you're going to get a phone call." Sure enough, he was in the chair back at the hotel either that night or the following morning. But we then had, we'd lost to Germany. The the whole thing. Lost to Germany, lost Kevin. The mood wasn't particularly upbeat, and we were really on the back foot with the media. And I was flying with the team, and one of my colleagues, Joanne Budd, who worked with the team for many, many years, brilliant press officer and operations press person. She organised everything superbly. And Joanne was in Finland already with the press. And we trained on the Monday and we were due to fly. And she's ringing me saying, look, who's up tonight? Who's the captain going to be? Blah, blah, blah. I said, look. And normally I try and find out and tell her just so we can set the tone. But obviously wasn't sure what was happening myself. I get a phone call. Can I go and see Howard in his room? And obviously Howard and I were quite close anyway. So I go in the room and Howard stood there, towel around his waist, shaving foam on. Literally every stroke with his razor, it was like, well, Adam's art, Campbell's art, Beckham's art. Who the bloody hell's been captain? And I'm like looking there. He's not at any stage turned around to me at this point. He's looking at me through the mirror. So we're having this conversation with me looking at him in the mirror. So I'm not sure whether you're actually asking me, Howard, or if you're just musing. I said, I don't really know what you're asking here, but I said, you've got to do a big presser when you get out to Finland. I said, and it's going to be a bit lively. So you've got to have someone who can deal with that. But I don't know who's in your team, and I'm not trying to tell you who to pick in your team. I said, but if you want someone who can do the press for you, who's going to be in your team, if he's in, the best person to put it will be Gareth Southgate. He said, yeah. So he didn't give me any real indication. I wasn't really looking for any indication. And I certainly wasn't trying to tell him who to pick in the team, just to be clear. Anyway, off I go. And I've got Jo ringing me, and she's saying, oh, well, can you tell me who the captain's going to be? It'll just pacify the press for a bit, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, it's not fair. No one knows who it is yet. Don't know it. It's not fair. Anyway, we get on the plane at Luton and see Howard walk down the plane, and I think someone had mentioned to me it was going to be another player. I saw Howard walk past this particular player, saw him walk past Gareth, and then he sat next to Martin Keown, and that's when Martin Keown was given the captaincy for that game. So Martin had to come and do all of the fun press that night in Finland. So Gareth owes him one for that, to be honest with you, because that was a right old horrible environment to do your first England press conference as captain. But I'm sure Martin was proud of it, to be fair, and he did his very best. But yeah, that was one of the most surreal trips that we had in that regard. We went to Nigeria in 1999 for the Under-20 World Cup, and we were managed by Chris Ramsey, who's obviously since worked with QPR and Tottenham, amongst others, the former Brighton player. Really good coach and good person to work with. But we had a squad we had something in the region of about 60 people who called out of that squad. Clubs withheld them. There was a lot of issues going around at the time. So it was a very threadbare squad, and it was also a very small staff that went to. We were playing in Kano, I think was the first place we played in Nigeria. And we didn't have enough players to make up the numbers to play 11v11 the night before the game on the stadium pitch. And I played right back for the reserves. And I could still move a little bit then. I wasn't quite as out of physique as I am now. But it didn't bode well, because from memory, I think we beat the first team 2-0 on the stadium pitch. And America that whole night had Landon Donovan and Tim Howard playing for them.
Really? So did you get a cap for that?
Sadly, no cap. But I can always turn around and say I've played for England in some capacity. But that was a good group of people. Ashley Cole was in that squad.
Okay.
Ashley was an unbelievable, one of my favourite all-time England players. Ashley always played well in tournaments, in my opinion. That game against Portugal in 2004 at Stadium Light, I think he was, it was a duel between two iconic players in their positions in Ashley Cole and Cristiano Ronaldo. And I was sat just next to the dugout that night. So I was watching it at pitch level, and the speed between those two players was just, it had me gasping for air just watching it.
I mean, just almost coming up to, not current time, but you had a period of time with the Welsh team at Euro 2016, didn't you? Was that did you find a little bit of conflict of interests there?
I really enjoyed it. I got called summer of 2015. So I'd left the FA 6 months earlier. And the chief exec, who I knew reasonably well, rang me and said, would I come over for a meeting? Obviously, Wales were looking like, well, they were in contention for qualifying for the first time since '58 for a tournament. And they didn't have anyone within the organisation who had tournament experience. There are a lot of very good people in different positions, but no one had actually been to a tournament. So I got involved as a tournament advisor across the whole project, ranging from organising the meetings for which chartered plane company they're going to use for different flights, going out to France and looking at particular venue opportunities for the base camp, and going and sitting in meetings every week for maybe a day or a couple of days every fortnight sort of thing. And great people to work with. And then it was just unreal that they were always going to get drawn against England, weren't they?
Yeah.
That was a day where it was a strange day for me, because I was really bought into working with the Welsh as well. They were so good with me and so welcoming. Chris Coleman was absolutely brilliant. I didn't work around the team, so the tournament. My role was minimal around the tournament because all the work had been done from my side, and I was very conscious not to be trying to tell the Welsh to do things. You have to do this because we've done this with England. That wasn't my mindset, but it was just some of the nuances that crop up in tournaments that you wouldn't be aware of until you've been in them.
I see.
So that they used me a lot for that, and I say great people, but yeah, a little bit of conflict of interest. But to be honest with you, I really, the night where Wales beat Belgium in Lille 3-2. I mean, that was an unbelievable night from my point of view. As a football fan and as a working capacity. So, I felt at that point, obviously my time with England had finished, but saying that, I'm still a massive England fan. I hope that's come through in the conversation here.
Absolutely.
My passion for I want the team to do well. I want them to achieve success. I want Gareth to achieve success. And it's an organisation, the FA are an organisation that, often gets stick, like any big institution, but they do such a great deal of good work with very professional people. And I always say to people, the FA is in my bones now. It will be there forever. And I'm very passionate about it and care deeply.
Wow, that's really great to hear. And it's really great to hear that side of things, and some lovely, wonderful stories that you've given us there. And I'd just like to say thank you very much for that.
It's my pleasure, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and thank you very much to Adrian for his time there. Very much appreciated. You can follow him on Twitter at abevington11. So I hope you enjoyed it. I found it fascinating hearing the backstory about Sven's News of the World incident, and who knew about the Michael Owen moment after the Germany game. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, you too can get involved with the Your First England Away Game series. Just drop me a line at 3lionspodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch on Twitter at 3lionspodcast, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're feeling generous, then a review on the likes of iTunes always goes down well. I'll treat you to a beer on the next away day. Can't say fairer than that. I'll be back soon with another of our England at the Euros podcast. So please do join me for that. In the meantime, stay safe and keep your distance. Cheers.